Good afternoon. I greet you all who joined us. Media Center Ukraine Forum continues its work, ninth year of war and 160th day since the start of a full-scale invasion. And I thank all who speaks the truth about this war, about heroic resistance of Ukrainian nation. And now we will discuss a very important issue. We will speak of how Ukraine will comply with the requirements of the EU in the media sphere on our path on joining the EU. I would like to introduce you our speakers. That's Olga Herasymiuk, head of the National Council, Olga Stefanyshyna, Vice Prime Minister on issues of European integration, Mykyta Poturaiev, head of the Committee of the Parliament on Humanitarian and Information Policy, and also Alexander Tkachenko, Minister of Culture and Information Policy. Ms. Olga, I would like to give you the floor. Please tell us about the changes in the new edition of the draft law of media that will be proposed in the closest future to our MPs to consider. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to my colleagues. Just recently, the roundtable have been conducted with the Council of Europe, the author of the draft law, the National Council, the media, civil society, media experts. They participated also the online, our colleagues that joined our discussion. Also, there was a Deputy Minister of Culture, Taras Shevchenko, with us. And today, we discussed overall the novelties that are proposed by the draft law. And the most important, I would like to say, today, publicly, it was announced that all the actors of media market, media sphere, are joined with this common idea of the necessity of approving the law of media. This law is very topical in our community, and the 10th year Ukraine has been working on it, and all were anonymous on the thought that today is the time when we have to pass this draft law. It happens that Ukraine passes these laws, very important laws, in uneasy times. We just recall that during the time of the Revolution of Dignity, we could pass the law of suspending of community media, and we develop it. Now the European Commission is writing their findings when it invited Ukraine to the family of the European countries. They wrote the following, that in these uneasy times during the aggression that Ukraine resists, Ukraine could really well balance the needs that arise in the martial law, in the military time, to restrict certain, to impose certain restrictions on information and freedom of speech. And they mentioned this great specialty of Ukrainians to be in this circumstance, even this, to stay in Europeans, even in these uneasy circumstances. So, about the changes, we discussed those changes in details. The presentation of novelties will be presented on the website of National Council, also on the websites of our partners and colleagues. My colleagues will speak about it, and I represent the National Council, and this is one of the important moments of regulation, and the objective may be concerns of many so this regulation does not become censorship or some excessive restrictions. I would like to confirm that this draft law, this law, is absolutely in line with the requirements that are to any European regulator, and it proposes such changes that national regulator of Ukraine will finally become and receive proper role and substantiate its independence, which will be stipulated not only in our attempt to announce it and laws that our MPs are passing, but also in the directive about audiovisual services, Article 30, where the Europeans directly state that and require that from us. That directive requires enforcing the role of National Council that I see in increasing its independence from political pressure, from private influence, and from any other parties. So independent regulator is independent media. That's a direct formula. And we as Ukraine regulators that lives for 25 years, we want to demonstrate new culture of independence, of regulation in informational sphere. That's briefly, I hope I briefly answered your question. Thank you, Ms. Olga. We are aware that the law of media is very topical, and now is the requirement of our European partners on our path to the European Union, to join the European Union. Please tell us, share with us how our partners assess this draft law. Good afternoon, all the participants. Actually, this team, we regularly work for a second week to negotiate about the text and work on the text. I would like just to make a few emphasis why this recommendation is one of the political recommendations, because it's related to basic human rights, basic freedoms of each state. The European Union, providing Ukraine the candidate status, confirmed that we comply with the Copenhagen criteria of membership. We have free media, we have pluralism of information access. Those are the standards that our country complies with. And on the level of legislation, we have to confirm that. Luckily, we actually conducted many discussions with stakeholders, with European colleagues, and just recently, just today, we had a round table in the wide circle, and we're using legislation of the 90s currently. And speaking of contemporary approaches to regulating the media market, it's not only TV, it's not only print media, it's practically 80% of what our life is comprised of, the information, and legislation has to be contemporary as well. And I think that this requirement is a part of the recommendations of the European Commission, allows us to keep this balance in regulating, because such regulating that is proposed by the law of media is fully in line with the EU directives, and we hope that this law will be passed in the first reading, and it's on the floor in the Parliament, and will improve it with a recommendation. And it's really important that this law creates a market, actually, because I'm dealing with different issues, spheres of Euro integration. Speaking of the market legislation, any regulation creates conditions for a transparent and competitive market. The same refers to the media law. The most important clauses for our European colleagues are clauses regarding the structure of property, change to legislation. They provide precise compliance to the EU directives about transparency and of property. For the first, since the independence regulator has not only regulatory authority, but the regulator is obliged to develop the market and provide the market with opportunity to develop. Those are the unique novelties that are in the draft law. In the conditions of full-scale aggression, we firstly did not even think that this legislation has to be considered now, but approving this law, the law was discussed for years before that, and it allows us to fulfill this recommendation, and we're working with the EU Commission to work through the changes to the second reading and provide their recommendations. Also, there are comments from the MPs, but the time has come. The war also lasts on the informational front, and we have to be a part of this informational front and a part of that market. Thank you. Mr. Mykyta, I understand that your committee that you're heading was working on the draft law for a long time, so please tell us about the results. Well, actually, we have finished working on the version that is on the website of the Parliament in the 2020, and we promised back then that we're not stopping. All the proposals that were given to us from the professional organizations, media, from NGOs that work in the media center, like watchdogs, like auditors and controllers and so forth, that we will consider those comments. And the work on this draft law did not stop neither in 2020 nor in 2021. And actually, that we actually managed with that speed to consider certain recommendations, for initial recommendations, to the first reading from Vice Prime Minister and the office, and from our European colleagues. It's because the work did not stop, that we reached the start of this year that regretfully started with a tragedy, with a national tragedy, a full-scale aggression, occupation, and war crimes. But nevertheless, we're prepared. And with the things that we were prepared, we did a lot. We have the opportunity to propose a package of amendments that will be made to this draft law to make the draft law comply with the requirements of EU legislation, not by 85%, as the text complies for the first reading that was analyzed, and start by 100%. And as I mentioned during our table, the criteria of this draft law is very simple. It will contain what complies with the interests of Ukraine and the EU legislation. And what it contains and complies will stay there. There will be no setbacks, neither in national interest nor in the interest of the European or Euroatlantic integration of Ukraine. The only new novelty is Ukrainian media interested, Ukrainian community and Ukrainian state is interested, and that complies with the requirements of the EU legislation. Well, that's it. Thank you. Mr. Alexander, how do you assess the changes to the draft law? Firstly, this law is a historical, I think. Here are my colleagues from the Parliament that we started operations jointly and who are authors of this draft law. It was topical for a long time. There are many novelties that are innovative, so to speak, on self-regulation. We involve all the media sector to self-regulation jointly with National Council. This never happened before, and my request to my colleagues, it's a unique window of opportunity to impact the transformation of media sector that faces a lot of challenges due to the war. And secondly, what is important, what differs this law from the European laws, but complies to the challenges of the time. It's a special novelty devoted to Russian aggression. We impose norms that allow legally, not via court decisions, but legally using law to defend Ukrainian informational space from aggression of barbarians from Russia. And the most important, this law, in the end of the day, unblocks all those patches from different laws that exist, because if we needed to make some changes, we all addressed the committee, okay, let's urgently change some part to the existing law. And for the first time, we'll have a systematic, complex answer to many challenges that we face, not only due to candidacy to the EU, but due to the war as well. So we come to this law. Maybe a question to you. You said, actually, there are concerns in media sphere because the National Council receives a lot of authority. What are the safety valves, so to speak, to prevent the misuse? Well, the law. There is historical cocktail for those concerns as well. But we're on a different level of development of our state. On also speaking of regulation, I wanted to speak about the concerns. Firstly, to get rid of them, we have to really thoroughly read the draft law that was given and that colleagues spoke about. Because first, what you will see there is care that national regulator will assist development of informational space, that nowhere it's written anything that could provide the ability of regulator to become monster censor, or how it's called, that it does not regulate the activity of journalists, because pretty often they mix it up and say that it's like relevant to journalistic work. It does not block bloggers, because also it's a widespread stereotype, it's not so, that it allows opportunity for online media to achieve status of media and achieve certain preferences, because when now online media, they want to register somewhere and get accreditation for some event, it might be accredited, but it's not compulsory. When online media, also it's stipulated in the law, voluntarily register, voluntarily. Those who want to, they achieve separate preferences, like they will have accreditation, they will have protection for those who sphere in online media sphere. For regional, regional media, this law allows them to stop being so-called just accompanying for local municipalities, but to become independent from local municipalities. And additionally, I want to say that National Council in this law will be have very easy communication with media, because media achieve the opportunity to simply register and license, simple license. It's a very simplified procedure, and all those bureaucratic hindrances that exist, they will be lifted. And I can speak in detail and answer in details if you're interested in this, with the situation about the possible so-called, there were switching off TV channels. Sometimes they operate, speaking of National Council, because I said that none of the TV channels was switched off by a council, even though we're sorry that during preparation of a hot stage of the war, National Council did not have the opportunities that would prevent it from would allow it to stop Medvedchuk TV channels, and those cases are still in the courts. This law allows the opportunity. Part 9, please read it, that allows us to resist Russian aggression in media sphere, and we would prevent such things because those channels were closed by a Security Council. Those channels would not blame Ukraine for, so-called quote-unquote killing its own citizens, because they're saying, like, quote-unquote civil war, civil conflict. And this law gives us the opportunity to prevent such channels from saying those things. It marks the aggressor country as Russia, possibly Belarus, because from their territory there are attacks. We don't know how it will develop further, but this law allows the opportunity for a National Council to impact the severe violations of law and support the market. And also the moment that everybody is interested in, this law has the norm that allows National Council to prevent switching off the channels without the decision of National Council by operators. So the line. Right now we cannot impact the concert in Silbud because the law does not allow us. In the new law, this norm is written, and all the problems could be lifted during the decision of National Council. Also, there is a novelty as co-regulation. This no European practice has this novelty. Number of work agree group maybe support me or maybe they'll correct me, but on the contrary, there were even comments on this norm because this body as co-regulation, like it removes authority and function from the council, but we agree to that and support that for the market to be able to make those safety valves to prevent misuse of power. I take a lot of your time, but I try to answer all possible questions. Thank you to your colleagues, your answers, your questions. Good day, Dmitry Dura, Espresso. I would like to remind you that on 4th of April, our TV channel was switched off from digital network T2, and still we were received no explanations why. On 18th of April, the petition was created on the website of the government, and petition received enough signature to be considered, and still the TV channel did not receive any answer to this petition. So the government did not even consider this petition and did not provide us with any answer. And maybe to Ms. Olga Herasymiuk question, as far as I understand, after this law of media will be passed, the National Council will be able to control the concerned entity that illegally switched off Espresso channel from the digital network T2. Maybe I will start because the was speaking about it. Because firstly, your TV channel, luckily, is accessible to watchers on satellite. They can watch it, and you or maybe your colleagues also broadcast a marathon, single marathon, and this complies to the order of the president and necessity that exists in the cable networks. You're present, but regarding your applications, National Council received a lot of them. We provided the answers, and I hope you know those answers. And that's why I said that this law has to be supported, because in such cases to which we have no relation to as the Council, the National Council will be able to react to them if they happen. Right now we are in conditions of the martial law and war, and I think that certain things are happening with certain political coloring to it, and I would like to avoid that. We need to unite to win over the enemy. Firstly, informational war. Correspondingly, I agree that your channel, I think it's good that your channel is on air, and recently I was in Poland where we signed a memorandum with our colleagues, and we found out about cooperation with your channel and about other opportunities for Espresso and for Espresso employees. Ms. Bermaka, she has a radio show. There, we heard her. So we agreed that it's not really switching off, and your frequencies, there's marathon, so there's no black gaps. Your questions were the concern with Espresso paying the debts. That's maybe it's also irrelevant to your regulation. So I hope that today we answered your question. I only ask you to support our draft law. As owners of your TV channels, those who are adjacent, please vote for it. And National Council will sincerely. The speaker is not using the microphone. You said there was some petition. There was an order from Prime Minister. The answer is given to you on this. Very briefly, I don't. I'm saying that I'm an expert in the situation that is discussed.
I'm a member of the Security Council, and from a standpoint of information hygiene, I wanted to say that, firstly, in the first days of war, after approving the decision of Security Council about martial law, was a restriction related to the martial law. Restrictions are also related to informational space. Did not provide any individual means to your TV channel separately or other channels. We're living in the full-scale war. Thank God we have ability to work on different reforms, but I want to point your attention that there are no individual means regarding precise some or several channels was not imposed. All has to be comply with the law. All has to comply with the decisions of the Security Council. And the second comment from my side, it's about if there are possible manipulation after the law was passed regarding the authority or restriction of rights of certain media. I want to remind that we are a candidate member for the EU, and this has therefore have additional juridical obligations. All the laws that will pass since the 24th of June for your integration obligations, they will be not only assessed as acts jointly with the EU, but also there will be monitoring of their implementation. The framework of the EU regulation that we pass those laws, if there will be even minor concerns of independence of the regulator and implementation of its authority and the access of media to mechanisms of self-regulation, those things will be publicly presented as comments, as issues to agree. It means that we as politicians and the president that took the political obligations to implement those 7 recommendations will not be able to promote the decisions about membership of Ukraine in the EU. It's a very important argument that currently is politically is the main like safety valve, so to speak. Book reform. Question to Mr. Poturaiev: are there any international experts among the authors of the draft law, and what clauses appeared with regards to the martial law, and is there a political will to approve it in the parliament? Because the head of the parliament thinks that the law of media will be about most dubious discussion initiatives. And question to Olga: Herasymiuk: what is the responsibility of the violators of the law, and what it will be illegal according to this law? And the draft law of media will also include online media, not only TV and radio. Thank you. Any questions? As one of the co-authors, I will answer. Yes, your colleagues, it includes online media. It's known since 2020. In text in the first reading that's available on the website. It's not a novelty. It's welcomed by the civil society, and it was confirmed in the round table. Why? Because we cannot have in the modern world a lot of sphere that amounted 50% before the war without regulation. Because there, it's possible not only have any commercial advertisement, but also interference is possible or impact is possible in political process, an election process, that also is absolutely unacceptable from a standpoint of the EU legislation, and therefore the law of media implemented for the second reading, the parts of the EU directives regarding the election process will be. It was not really expressed that way, that's strict in the first reading. Currently, the practice, general practice, world practice, understands that there is no difference between linear, traditional, and new and non-linear media, because audiovisual content is produced by all. Websites, online platforms of joint access, TV companies, radio companies. Even radio companies produce audiovisual content, not only audio content. So lately, it happens for over 15 years, divergence, diffusion, and other things between media. And not to consider that legislation is, this would mean that we would create problems not only to the state and community, but to the media as well. But regarding the working group comprised of Ukrainian specialists, Ukrainian scientific community, media lawyers, independent media lawyers, all representatives of politics from the parliament, also from the ministry, and from the regulator as well. But for many years, not only 2019-20, but before that, with the previous parliament, with the help of the Council of Europe that we appreciate, European experts constantly were involved with the work on this draft law. On this edition in 2019 and 20, at least 5 European experts worked with us. I just cannot spend a lot of time to go into my tablet and look up the last names, but there are names of experts. And there was a lot of public discussions where they participated. They even came to Ukraine, but then we had COVID pandemic and they were online. So indubitably, I spoke with Mr. Steven Norman, that has the head of Council of Europe in Kyiv. I thanked them as co-authors of this law, because for many years, the Council of Europe directly participated in creating this draft law, not only with our parliament, but with the previous parliament as well. Therefore, they are co-authors, and we perceive them as co-authors of this law. Regarding the authority of the regulator, again, the authority of the regulator did not increase. They become more transparent and more precise, more crisp. The sphere of action, the terms of reference, yes, increased. And now it covers all the media market, which is correct, because it can be that, like in Orwell, all animals are equal, but some are more equal than the others. It cannot be that in the country there are media and 50% of the market is regulated and other half do whatever they want. It's unfair. From the economical competition standpoint, it's unfair from the standpoint of professional competition, and it's unacceptable from the standpoint of professional ethics. Thank you. My colleague asked so many questions. Could you repeat those? Maybe I didn't answer something. When I was a young journalist, I tried to ask just one question. But I recall about Mr. Stefanyshyuk, head of the Speaker of the Parliament. I just wanted to support his point that it's one of the most laws that will have the most discussion about it, and there are discussions about it. When we're speaking about that today, we had one of those, but it doesn't mean that it's something bad, because sometimes journalists interpret that it's something negative. It's just negative expectation, but it is not so. And then you want to ask something else from me, but I would like to add one more point. Was other document that we implemented that was up to many discussions, mostly not among journalists, because journalists are liberal, democratic, and sane. It's Istanbul Convention. There were many discussions, right, in our civil society. So should we have not passed it to open the gates to the European integration? We had to. The same refers to this law. Many discussions, but we have to pass it. If we actually
want to start negotiations with the EU about our membership. That's it. Thank you. More. And it's also necessary for the civil society because we have to enter the civilized space. We regulate TV and that, like we had it in the 90s. I don't know how old you were when those laws were passed in 1994, but you were not even born. Okay. So you can imagine. And over that time, you see how things have changed. You can you can do without TV and radio. You can just open your cell phone and watch any content you want. Because we move to the digital world now. And information penetrates from all devices. And some say, we're thinking about online, but some say there'll be a new version of relations with online. Pretty soon we'll not just see in the internet videos or hear audio, we'll be able to sense each other online. I was in the conference in Strasbourg, really. It's one more challenge. We don't know how to regulate internet. What will we do with when you enter internet and you know how your colleague perceives something? And we live with legislation that it does not even speak about cell phones. We have to regulate that online as well. And in Europe, right now, they created several directives about regulation of online. They have not been approved yet, but there are many discussions. And a lot of our colleagues, regulators, they reached that point. I don't know. You had 8 more questions, but maybe you're satisfied with this. You said enough. Okay. More questions, please. Verkhovna, 5th channel. I would like to come back to topic of switching off Espresso and 5th channel from digital movie. Espresso, 5th channel, and Prямý channel. On this session, on this topic, your committee passed the decision to address the concerned RRT to National Council and to Ministry of Culture on the question who and what were the official reasons to switch off the channels. Did you receive the answer to those questions? And it's very sorry that Minister of Culture left the press conference. Possibly you, Ms. Olga, or Mr. Mykyta can answer when will the channels be switched on and why they have not been switched on for the time being. What didn't happen? Well, actually, we didn't regulate the return of the channels, same as switching them off, but you know that this issue was considered in the committee, and we were all together publicly. I would try to find out what happened. I don't want to maybe go into, maybe reiterate the details what happened on the committee. Yes, we received answers, and I'd like to emphasize what Ms. Olga was saying. From the answers, I received one more confirmation that the part in the law of media that was in the first reading, if the law was passed in 2019-20, this problem would not have happened now. Even if this issue arose, theoretically, it would have been regulated the other way, among all stakeholders. But it exists there, and it makes it impossible for the future to arise a situation like this, where there are questions from the civil society, from the audience, from the European partners. Therefore, drawing a line and summarizing the answers that we received, we have to pass some media legislation that clearly stipulates that, expresses what can or cannot be done by the operators, and only on the basis of which decisions or grounds regulator has the key role. And I thought and I think
that this issue, the situation that happened in the result of passing in the beginning of the war certain decision of the Security Council that Olga Stefanyshyna was speaking about. Nevertheless, the situation is evolving, and the marathon, evolving, single marathon, single news. And I thought and I think that today we have to find the possibilities for each media that is willing, that is ready to the max and efficiency. And I know that all the media in Ukraine, they're willing, they're ready, that remain, and that will operate responsibly. All that want to make their input in the victory, in the big victory, in the information victory, to have the opportunity to do that. Probably will answer the question for the third time, so I don't know. Should I add something to it? Because you heard my big answer, maybe for the second time or the third time. To answer something. So if you have something to say, maybe after press conference. All the letters that you sent, they were all answered. Please just look at your mailbox. They have precise, clear answers. We always answer the question. Dear speakers, I want to thank you for this detailed conversation that we had, and I hope, dear colleagues, all that work in media sphere, that almost all the questions we answered today. So thank you. Thank you, dear colleagues, for your work, for speaking the truth of what's happening in our country. So